Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. Welcome to this episode of Anhar. Anhar literally means confluence of rivers, as we coined the term. So it embodies the idea of knowledge streaming down like in a river, so that imagery is for us to visualize. We have the topic for this episode, knowledge difference between schooling and education. What brings value to our education? What is it that gives the difference or the distinction to a good education as compared to mere schooling? Do you have what it takes for you to prepare for the challenges of life? Are you ready to continue your education? Are you ready to feel you are already learned and lose much of your shine on the way as the life takes you along? So to unpack this important topic for us, we have Dr. Ibrahim Zakaria Musa and Dr. Abstar Yusuf, founder of Endeavor. This is a topic that every one of us perhaps can relate to our society. We are a developing economy. We are challenged by the developmental needs. We are challenged to fine-tune whatever industries we may have. Some are at a fledgling level. We have never been able to come out of that fledgling stage, like fisheries. For the last 40, 50, 70, 60 years, we have been struggling to improve industries like fisheries, and we have never learned. Our education system, our curriculum has never been able to inculcate this drive to diversify our economy. I mean, we have been concentrating on tourism and tourism alone. Mm-hmm. So this overdependence has made us extremely vulnerable to economic shocks that occur internationally, especially in the context of conflicts going on. Mm-hmm. We are very prone to economic recessions or economic downturns. What do you mean by education, good schooling, or difference between schooling and education? How would you define that for us?
Thank you.
To start.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajmain. It's an absolutely important point that we have taken up today. I think most of the time in our program here at Anhar, we deal with issues of society. I think we are always trying to deal with something that's going on in our society, and that will have lessons for the viewers. Through our discussion, we enhance our views on certain topics, but certainly we are talking about our mind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with a mind better than any other of His creation, if I may say so. I think that's the thing that really defines our difference between the others and us. So in that sense, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. So wouldn't that be the point where we think we have to create this mind? We have given the raw material. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the raw material, but we must try to put it into order such that it will be beneficial for our society, for ourselves as we go along in life. And so the point that we would like to separate or try to distinguish a difference, if there is this thing called schooling and that which we call an education. And we all go to school. That's the first place we see outside our home, in fact, in order to become somebody, a more mature human being. I guess that's the purpose that all our parents send us to school first. That has to be a structured approach to teaching through memorization and learning in the classroom mainly. I don't think we have too much association with real life at that age. And rightly so, we play and we find joy in seeing others. We learn to little habits of sharing and caring and loving. Those are also taught, particularly at the primary level. I think then as you go to the next part of your education, you are mainly working towards passing an exam, because there are exams, and that seems to be the portal from which you launch yourself to higher studies. So in a school, in the older days, not now perhaps, here more focused on education, schools more focused on passing exams and structured testing and all these things. But in the past it was not so, I would say. There was more about values and manners and all these included in the school. You had prefects who looked into how you were behaving, the principal did that, or the matrons did that, whatever. So it was that structured element of school that brings out ready human beings for the university, to the higher levels of education. So the other part, as you say, education is really honing our brain to become creative and thinking and thoughtful and imaginative, so that we are able to look at issues in a more abstract way. We are able to go beyond just talking about people or events into talking about issues and how a future can be, what if and how. Ask more the questions of how something is rather than just merely what it is. And that way we begin to sort of work our brain and bristle it in order for us to be able to go beyond this very basic level of thinking. And I think there are so many levels of that, obviously, but as the discussion goes, I would like to give the floor to Ibrahim also to say something beyond what I have to say. Yeah.
Now, you have asked the difference between the schooling and education. As we all know that the school, there's a huge difference between schooling and education, where schooling is certain formal the process of attending classes and achieving and passing the exams and finally getting a certificate or a degree. Whereas education is all about a process of lifelong learning, where you are learning and experiencing in your life and preparing yourself to face the challenges of your life. Where in education, you are supposed to develop critical thinking skills, as well as you are intellectually and socially and emotionally fit to cater the needs of your life, as well as the issues and problems that you are going to face in your life that will be solved through your education. And now, I remember a saying of our Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, Almighty Lord, Allah educated me and made my education excellent. Now, if you analyze the whole saying of this, a beautiful saying of Prophet, what do you mean by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala educated Prophet and made his education perfect and excellent, which means it is not merely a process of going through a curriculum or attending classes and passing through exams and finally getting a certificate. It is more than that. It's more broader than just what we call schooling. So now you have to have a different concept of schooling and education, where education, as I mentioned earlier, is much broader than schooling. So in this process of schooling, what we are finally achieving, mere data and information, not necessarily valid knowledge or so categorically speaking, we see the society is divided into three parts of resembling ourselves, of what we are doing as ants, like ants, which accumulate a huge piles of grain, which we say that it is like a data which has no long-term benefit out of that. Or we may become spiders who are gathering some information to deceive others. Or we may become honeybees, which is going all around to far distance, collecting nectars from the various flowers and bringing back to the hives and producing honey for the human being. So these three categories, if we are speaking about schooling and education, some may become ants, just getting sort of data, information. Now, if you ask students, they may have a lot of informations, because in the school system, most of the process is focused on rote learning and getting more and accumulating more and more information without having any sort of training or skills. That is why, in our society, how many certificate holders, degree holders are there? And the question is, it is not a matter of how much you know. It is a question of who you are. What are you going to produce? What is your lifetime achievement? Now, under this huge canvas, what is your position? Have you ever managed to put even a dot on the canvas before you leave, depart from this world? What is your achievement? So it is not a question of how much knowledge you have, how much information you have. You have to ask who you are. What are you going to produce out of your knowledge? That is why, we Muslims, as a Muslim, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of education? What is the nature of human being? And what is his role to play in the universe, as well as what is his ultimate destiny. You know.
Very important questions, yeah.
So these are the questions to which we need to have a very firm and convincing answers, and in order to achieve a goal of our life.
These questions should ultimately advance into very fruitful curricula content, so that we prepare ourselves for life, the challenges of life, to sustain life, not only for us to live life for ourselves, but to sustain the life that we live for the generations to come, to sustain the environment, to sustain the resources, and to advance, to leave the world as a better than we inherited from our predecessors. Well, Dr. Zakaria, you made a very strong point that we should become some level of producers rather than being a consumer. Like as a consumer of knowledge or consumer of skills, always a beneficiary of skills. So every one of us, too, depending on our abilities, our caliber, we should be able to produce something, at least to our family, to our society, to our neighborhood. So people should benefit to some extent from our knowledge, the knowledge and the important thing is education is one thing that we are obsessed with to acquire. We think education is a must. But the means of education, we think, are only schools, colleges, and universities, and formal institutions. So we have this obsession that if we miss that, for example, if we miss the bus by some twist of fate, then we regard that as very often, we regard it very often as, oh, we missed the bus, then there is no way we could catch it. Life is gone by, and no way to educate ourselves. But that is not the case. What are your comments about such situations?
Well, very true. That's not the case at all, because it's a present situation. You have lots of other means of getting educated. And even in the ordinary sense, today or yesterday even, your education is a lifelong process, as Brian mentioned. And so as a lifelong process, every day you're learning. Do you want to learn, or you are just living your life and letting life lead you rather than you leading your life? If the former, which is a passive process, you just live and you just do what life tells you to do, and that's not enough. If you are, as we know in our Islam also, we were sent into this world to be the movers and shakers of society, to improve this place or manage this place for the next generations. So if you're going to do that, we've got to be preservers and improvers also. We got to preserve the past, and we got to improve on them, so that you don't neglect the opportunity for the next generation to not have that past things also in their vision. And because unless they have that in their vision, they cannot make the connection to the past. Right? So all these things come, as we say, from a fertile mind. When Ibrahim said, there's a lot of information that is, banked, so to say, during school days. Math, chemistry, physics. We don't use any of those except knowing. If you get a formula, you know it is, H2O or CH3OH or whatever. You know what it is. But you are not a chemist, or you're not an engineer, chemical engineer. They would use those. But for us to have them, it's a good platform for us to live our life with awareness. And I think that's very important. So school, I would say, is a very important part of our life. But they are the building blocks, at least the foundation of what we learn so that we are able to comprehend the universe, comprehends our environment also in a way that we can begin to be that change agent as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us. So that is why I think there is these 3 levels people say. Basically, it's a very simple saying about people who, is a certain amount of knowledge each one of us has. And you can divide them into people who have a lot of knowledge, those who have a medium type of knowledge, and those who don't have much knowledge. And that's the way life is. So if you say it's a strong mind, a medium mind, and a weak mind. So there is a saying that the weak mind, the strong mind thinks about issues. Right? Issues are abstract, essentially. You may have a problem when this falls and breaks. How can you put it together? But beyond that, there are issues like somebody is being very mean to another staff in your organization, and how do you deal with that staff? That you can't just, it's not like putting a glass together or something, right? So, and the next level is those who think about events. They talk about events. Something happened today, another thing happened yesterday. We're all excited about it, and that somebody else then takes that message to somebody else and say, you know, this happened today. This news was on the news today. You know what happened. Then there's another level of people who say, this person said this or that person said this. This person was doing something that's very funny. Now see, so you're looking at gossip level and a discussion level and then engagement level. So you got to go to school to be able to begin to move from one situation or level of thinking to another thing of thinking. But even beyond that strong mind thinking about issues, you will then have to think about metaphysical stuff, metacognition. You'll have to think about spirituality. These are very esoteric topics. These will have to be from the basis of what you have learned through people like Zakaria or through a big professor in a university or the great books you are reading. All those knowledge and awareness from everywhere which makes your mind fertile. So in that process you begin to ask the questions why and how rather than merely what. And so that is what will move the ground in our case of our nation also. You have to have people who can think at that level. Without that, you can't innovate. You can't produce new things. You can't diversify. All these are required from education. But if our education system does not allow the opportunity for those young minds to come to these levels, then it is a very sad thing. That's why I say a mind is a terrible thing to waste.
So education system is supposed to open up the potential of the mind.
Absolutely.
Or unleash the potential of the mind and tickle the mind to imagination, to be fired up to pursue depths of education and skills, and to improve continuously as a continuous process. Just a moment of break and we'll be right back. Stay tuned. We have it's quite a clear misconception that we underestimate the potential of human beings very often, especially in school systems. But when it comes to real education, people discover themselves. People discover their potential, their hidden abilities when they are really immersed in life situations or challenging situations of life. Like, for example, people learn businesses when they are forced into such situations. They learn direct from the from experience. No education, no schooling, no business school experience, no curriculums, just experience business processes, and finally come up with re-engineering of business processes to do better than what they initially experienced. In other words, they become better business people as compared to their previous bosses under whom they learned these skills. So the potential, do we seem to realize that potential in human beings as we impart formal education through schooling, various levels of schooling? I mean, primary, secondary, and even tertiary schooling that's happening, especially in Maldives.
Yeah, of course, we are talking about the value of a good education, where we need to find out the potentials and the abilities and capacities and the needs and interests of students. Theoretically speaking, about the purpose of education, there are two positions. One position is focus on society-centered positions, where they are aimed to produce a good citizens to serve the nation or society. To serve the nation or society. In other words, purpose of education is to produce most obedient servants to the society, most obedient students or servants for the society. So this is the one aspect of focusing on education, to produce good citizens. But good citizens doesn't necessarily means a good human being. Whereas there's another position focusing on a child or person-centered position, where they are catering and focusing on the ability and the capability and the interest of each and every child, where they are focusing on producing a good human being. That is why Professor late Attas, Naqib Attas, who very recently passed away, is a very, very contemporary philosopher and have written a very rich writings, especially on Muslim education. He very rightly mentioned that the purpose of education is to produce a good human being. But unfortunately, most of the liberal and secular school systems are associated focusing on producing society-centered aims and goals to be achieved. Now, preparing individuals to function and adapt in their respective society is much more important than focusing to produce most obedient servants to the nations. Why? Because ultimately your nation is not going to be responsible, your society is not going to be responsible, or rather each and every individual is going to be responsible what they are contributing or producing or sharing to make a difference in any given society. So if you come to find out the ultimate objectives of Islamic education, you will be astonished to see that the focus is much emphasized on developing a good human being each individual human being to be a contributor to his society. That is why Islam focuses on the liberation of your spirit and soul and becomes a sincere and obedient servant of Allah Almighty by creating the consciousness in you that you are ultimately going to be responsible for what you do and what you contribute or what you share. So therefore, the ultimate goals of education, and it must be focusing on developing each and every individual to be a productive person who can contribute to his society or nation. So that is why, a very famous theologian, Muhammad Abdu, very rightly said, the purpose of education is not for socio-economic mobility, but for the development of the student's personality. He criticized the blind utilitarian aspect of educational system of his country, Egypt. He further said, this education is imparted so that the student may have in his hand a degree which would make it possible for him to occupy a clerical chair in any given department or office. But that his personality should be shaped by education and by the inculcation of values, so that he become a good and proper man in himself, so that he should well execute the task entrusted to him in the government or outside it.
So Ibrahim, what you're saying is
this fact enters the minds of the teachers. This fact, you just listen it. He says this fact that he is emphasizing on producing a good human being. So this fact enters the minds of the teachers, nor of those who appoint those teachers. So this is a very noble purpose that
So it's
Abdu is talking about.
Muhammad Abdu, the famous Shaykhul
Azhar.
Shaykhul Azhar
Yes.
in the early 20th century. Very famous figure. So the essence of education is, as he has enlightened the world, development of personality. I think our curriculums nowhere will seek to develop personality traits or attitude development. But of course, the document says it all. There is no dearth of content on attitudes and everything under the sun. But the issue is the practical inculcation of these values. That is where the deficiency lies.
So maybe it's a process of degradation of that as an important aspect of life. Maybe that's why they're not focusing on that. The focus is on, as you say, get a degree and get a job and get rich. That is the main purpose.
By any means.
That is the way. Because most people go to school to get grades, and grades are so important because it's the stepping stone to a good university. But I think right now they're looking, good universities also don't look at grades alone. They look at their attitude and the kind of experiences they've had. Because you'll have to write an essay also nowadays You don't just send your transcript. You have to write a good essay, but then you can write a good essay. But the point is, when you are gone there for an interview, you got to be able to defend this much of work. So from that point of view, I am fully for the fact that education also has to be there in schooling. Schools must have that as element of education, which is, as you say, manners and respect for others, and also with that the creative juices that must come into your mind in order to be a better human being for society. But Ibrahim, the point I was trying to make is, I was not quite sure whether, when you said the education's goal is to produce a good human being first, I thought there was some kind of a little confusion on when I heard that he was supposed to be a good human being, but not somebody necessarily to be a good servant for the government.
No,
I was thinking, but once you are a good human being, a good servant for the government also happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you become a good human being, ultimately you are going to be a very good, a very sincere servant of your government or your country, your society.
I think Dr. Zakaria was referring to, widely it is acknowledged that
he's clarified that.
Yeah,
now. It's okay.
The purpose of education is of course very noble, very lofty. It is to prepare for life, and to lead life in such a way so that we are able to solve the problems of life. But the issue is we are not able to confront those issues so that we are able to devise solutions ourselves. The problem lies in not preparing for life, but rather preparing to become good employees and good soldiers and people who are dependent on other organizations. But rather that sense of independence is not being cultivated in our education systems. What we find is that where this versatility of human beings are concerned, we are potentially versatile, but we don't draw on that versatility as we impart education. The problem we find is education system falsely presumes that I can specialize in one thing. I can become a doctor, I can become an engineer, I can become a lawyer, I can become this and that. And that's it. But look at how education and science emerged under the enlightenment of Islamic civilization, how they became polymaths, how they became the pioneers of biology, physics, and ballistics, and so on and so forth. So we don't seem to offer these opportunities. We don't seem to foster these skills as a society, so that we address the challenges that we have as a country. What are the problems we have? We are a maritime country.
Yeah.
What are we doing to surveil our maritime? These swathes that we have. And
so I would ask, why are we doing that? Why are we not allowing it?
And then the ports. Look at what is happening to our ports, airport and our seaports. Why are we struggling for decades and decades when we are not able to plan? What is our education system doing? Where are the experts? And how is our curriculum addressing these issues? Where is our fisheries industry? How are we addressing these issues? Where is our tourism industry? It's been taken over by international brands, managed by international companies, and much of the money is being siphoned off to another country, offshore banks.
Yeah.
And then there are so many issues.
And whenever we need to build a bridge, whenever we need to raise or high-rise skyscrapers,
Absolutely.
we have to invite outsiders. So where are our engineers?
We are
Where
able
are
to
our
make roads
experts?
even. Look at, bitumen roads, asphalt roads. We don't have even a patches, Look at how a patch is, for example, if there is a pothole, how we repair it, the quality of our repair. And we don't have engineers. We don't have any human resource planning in this country. And education system itself is has no correlation with what is
Needed.
what is needed. Absolutely, what is needed. There is no correlation between what is needed and what is being imparted. So this mismatch, what on earth? Why on earth are we really not planning our education system and not growing wiser as we go by the day?
So there's an issue of leadership also, I think. I think leaders by nature have to be visionary. The visionary nature of a human being is one of the characteristics of a leader, and leadership is that. And now, if you want to just say, so isn't a manager a leader? Yes, managers are also leaders, but they have more to manage. That is, allow them the opportunity to achieve the objectives that have been enunciated in the plan. That's their job. But a leader's job is to, to inspire. That means through vision and through bring an excitement into the hearts of people so that they feel that we will join in. We want to do this. And I think that's where we may be lacking. And that's where, if that vision and the goals of the future are well established, then obviously schools and health and society's values, all those must jive in order for these things to happen fluidly, smoothly. And it's not happening, which means there is some block somewhere. Or each person is doing their own thing, and all are not coming together.
There is some obsession with accreditation, official credentials of education. We are obsessed with qualifications, and also our promotions, our value, how we value education is mostly centered on academic credentials. How strong is my academic credentials? My performance has nothing to do with my promotion, my elevation up the ladder of my career. So what is important is जो देखता है वो होता नहीं, वो होता है वो देखता नहीं.
What is obvious is not seen, and what is seen is not obvious.
So what really happens is not really happening. What should happen is not happening. What shouldn't happen is happening. So
Abraham,
unfortunately,
what's happening in your university? You are the head of a university. You know the kind of people. Why do they go to the university? To get a degree?
Just, actually, this is a problem that starts not at the university level. Rather, it starts from the childhood. How we brought up our children, how we train our children, how we educate from the beginning. As in our family environment, how we bring up our children. This is a very important question that we each and every parent should ask ourselves. Do we really cater all these kind of...
how about, very important point, very important point. How do the parents make up for this deficiency in the curriculums? How do parents themselves address these issues?
Yeah, first of all, parents should not be very obsessive of pushing their children to achieve higher degrees just for the sake of achieving degrees. No, that is what I was in the earlier discussion emphasizing on inculcating goodness. Now, you may produce very smart engineers, you may produce very smart technicians,
without character,
but without character, without any having any trustworthiness in them. You may be very smart in your field, but you are not very trustworthy person. So, what is the purpose of education when you are very smart on one area, on the most important aspect of your character wise, you are
hopeless,
very hopeless. So, this is what what we call all-round education is meant to be part and parcel of our life in order to bring up a very holistic person.
To close, what are your remarks?
Yeah, I think we have forgotten one part, and it's always like that. And as I said, the highest we go is about creating thought process or the potential of a human being to be able to think abstractly, right? But that's where issues are. And without that, you really cannot be a leader. You cannot be a manager. You cannot be a CEO. You shouldn't be, because you are flooded with that kind of concepts all the time, concerns. Human relations problems, things like corruption, all these things are very delicate issues, but pernicious, extremely pernicious. You can't have a society progress with these things. But how do you deal with that? Such a multifactorial issue these things are. How to deal with that? And that means for that kind of leadership to be able to come to solutions will require a different type of mind. And I think our universities also must begin to nurture that idea. Schools must, as Ibrahim said, we have to think about goodness. Are you a good human being you are producing, or just somebody who has got good grades? Because I have worked with lots of international people, very capable human beings, but many of them just bad human beings. and that's the truth. Yeah. And so being Muslims, I think we can emphasize that point because the whole of our spiritual angle is about goodness in people, caring about people, persevering, and patience.
So encompassing the spiritual as well as material life of a man that instills in the quality of goodness that is sought out after.
This is it. So the bottom line is, whatever education we may acquire, it has to be
lifelong.
It has to be lifelong. It has to be also in tandem with personality, good personality traits, integrity, good character, and so on and so forth. Thank you, Dr. Absattar Yusuf, Dr. Ibrahim Zakaria Musa.
Pleasure.
We should definitely emphasize on good character as we think of good education. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum.